What's up, guys? Welcome back to Book Demystified. Have you ever wondered why some people work their entire lives and barely get by, while others seem to build wealth almost effortlessly? Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad reveals that the difference isn't about how much money you make, it's about how you think about money. This book, which has sold over 40 million copies worldwide, challenges everything traditional education teaches us about wealth. Kiyosaki had two father figures growing up: his biological father, a highly educated PhD who struggled financially, and his best friend's father, a high school dropout who became one of Hawaii's richest men. Through their contrasting philosophies, he discovered the real rules of money that schools never teach. Robert Kiyosaki grew up in Hawaii with a unique perspective on wealth. His poor dad was the superintendent of education, believed in job security, and followed the traditional path of getting good grades and a stable government job. His rich dad owned multiple businesses and invested in real estate, teaching young Robert the principles of financial intelligence from age 9. This contrast gave Kiyosaki a front-row seat to two completely different mindsets about money, and he watched as his highly educated poor dad struggled while his less formally educated rich dad thrived. That experience became the foundation for his mission to spread financial literacy to millions. The core message of Rich Dad, Poor Dad centers on one fundamental distinction: understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. Most people think their house is an asset, but Rich Dad taught that an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, while a liability takes money out. Your primary residence, even though it has value, costs you money every month in mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. It's taking money out of your pocket, which by definition makes it a liability. Rich people focus on acquiring income-generating assets like rental properties, stocks, bonds, and businesses. Poor and middle-class people accumulate liabilities they think are assets, like expensive cars and big houses. This simple misunderstanding keeps people trapped in the rat race. Kiyosaki explains that financial freedom comes from building a collection of assets that generate enough passive income to cover your expenses. When your assets produce more income than your living costs, you're financially free. Most people never achieve this because they're taught to work for money rather than have money work for them. This leads directly to Rich Dad's most important lesson: don't work for money, make money work for you. Poor Dad said, study hard, get good grades, find a safe, secure job. Rich Dad said, the poor and middle class work for money, but the rich have money work for them. When you work for a paycheck, you're trading your time for money, which means your income stops when you stop working. The wealthy build or buy assets that generate cash flow whether they're working or not. Kiyosaki describes how Rich Dad would pay him almost nothing as a young boy working in his store, deliberately making him frustrated enough to think differently. The lesson was to stop thinking like an employee waiting for a paycheck and start thinking like an owner building systems. Rich Dad wanted him to see opportunities to create value and generate income rather than simply trading hours for dollars. This mindset shift is what separates the wealthy from everyone else. Employees work in a business, but owners and investors work on systems that produce money. The book introduces what Kiyosaki calls the cash flow quadrant, which divides how people earn income into 4 categories. On the left side are employees and self-employed people who trade time for money. On the right side are business owners and investors who earn passive income from systems and assets. Poor Dad lived on the left side of the quadrant, always dependent on his employer and his own effort. Rich Dad operated on the right side, owning businesses and investments that generated income without his direct involvement. The path to wealth requires moving from the left side to the right side. This doesn't mean everyone should quit their job immediately, but it means you need to start building assets and systems outside your employment that eventually replace your job income. Most people stay stuck on the left side because they chase higher salaries instead of building income-producing assets. A doctor or lawyer might make a great income, but if they stop working, the money stops too. That's still trading time for money at a higher rate.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad also tackles why financial education isn't taught in schools. Poor Dad believed formal education was everything. Rich Dad said schools train people to be good employees and professionals, not wealthy people. The education system was designed during the industrial age to produce workers for factories and corporations, not entrepreneurs and investors. Schools teach you to work for money, but never teach you how money actually works. They don't explain taxes, debt, investing, or building businesses. This keeps people dependent on jobs and governments. Kiyosaki argues that financial intelligence has four main components: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and understanding law. Without these skills, people make poor financial decisions their entire lives. They get trapped in high taxes as employees, they go into bad debt for consumer goods, and they never learn to make their money grow. Rich Dad taught these skills through real-life experience, not textbooks, showing Kiyosaki how to read financial statements, identify good investments, and use legal structures to protect wealth. The concept of using good debt versus bad debt is another crucial distinction. Poor Dad said all debt is bad and you should avoid it. Rich Dad said there are two kinds of debt: debt that makes you money and debt that costs you money. Bad debt is consumer debt used to buy liabilities like cars, clothes, vacations, and things that lose value. This debt drains your income through interest payments and keeps you working harder. Good debt is borrowed money used to purchase assets that generate more income than the debt costs. If you borrow money at 5% interest to buy a rental property that generates 10% returns, the debt is making you money. The wealthy use other people's money to build wealth faster, while the poor avoid all debt or use it only for consumption. Banks and rich people use debt as a tool to acquire assets, which is why they get richer while everyone else struggles under consumer debt. Kiyosaki emphasizes that the biggest barrier to wealth isn't lack of money, it's fear and self-doubt. Poor Dad played it safe, terrified of taking financial risks. Rich Dad said overcoming fear and doubt is essential to building wealth. Fear of losing money keeps people from investing. Fear of failure keeps them from starting businesses. Self-doubt makes them believe they're not smart enough or capable enough. But Rich Dad taught that failure is part of the learning process. He went broke several times before becoming wealthy because he was willing to learn from mistakes. The rich take calculated risks and learn from losses. The poor avoid risk entirely and guarantee they'll never win. Rich Dad's philosophy was that you don't have to be the smartest person, you just need to surround yourself with smart people and keep learning. Financial intelligence grows through action and experience, not just reading books. If you're finding value in these book summaries, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. The practical takeaway from Rich Dad, Poor Dad is clear. Start building your asset column today. Begin with financial education by learning to read financial statements and understand how money works. Look for opportunities to acquire income-generating assets, even small ones like dividend stocks or a side business. Focus on assets first, luxuries second. Most people buy luxuries first with their paycheck and never invest. Rich people invest first and buy luxuries with the profits from their investments. Pay yourself first by putting money into assets before paying bills, which forces you to find creative ways to cover expenses. Think like an owner and investor, not an employee. Ask yourself constantly, is this putting money in my pocket or taking it out? This summary gives you the core concepts from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I highly recommend reading the full book to experience all the depth, stories, and nuance Robert Kiyosaki provides. The book includes detailed examples of his own investment experiences and many more lessons about taxes, corporations, and financial strategy that go far beyond what we can cover here. What was your biggest takeaway from this book?
Drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next summary.